Rick, have you ever heard the expression, the customer is always right?
Let me ask you something. How intelligent do you have to be to take a food order? Jesus.
There's a special run in hell reserved for people who waste good scotch.
How do you know this?
That's what I do. I drink and I know things.
All right. Welcome to the Ananas Podcast. My name is Sven, and I'm the founder of Ananas, an online training and management platform for the bar and restaurant industries. And I'm also the host for this podcast, where I get to hang out with some of the most inspirational people in our industry and try to dig deep and find out what it is that makes them tick and what they've done to achieve their success and how they make their mark on their industry. In this podcast, I'm talking to Tim Phillips, perhaps the most award-winning bartender in the world. He's won both titles of U.K Bartender of the Year, Australian Bartender of the Year, as well as being the winner of the global World Class Bartender competition, which basically crowned him world's best bartender in 2012. He has since gone on to open his own venues, which currently includes the multi-award-winning Bulletin Place and the Dead Ringer. Now, Tim and I go back a while, and I had a great time catching up with him and trying to figure out what it is he does that sets him apart from the rest and what it is that makes him so successful. I hope you have as much fun listening to this as I had doing the interview itself. So, without much further ado, let's get into it. Hey Tim, welcome to the podcast, bro.
Sven, how are you, mate?
I'm amazing, man. How are you?
I'm excellent, mate. It's I've known you for a while, mate, so it's a pleasure to catch up after this long time.
Dude, I'm so excited about this, dude. And like you say, we go back a while. When I first came across Mr. Phillips, I was looking for someone to join the alchemy training program, I think. And
yeah, that's right.
That's it. And I called on this guy called Marcus Motterum, the myth and the legend, for advice. And he recommended I contact you.
Well, yeah, he didn't want to. He obviously didn't want to do it. And at the time, I was working for him, and I thought it sounded amazing.
Yeah, I think you were working. I think maybe you'd moved to Black Pearl when I finally got in touch with either F4 or Black Pearl. So my sort of first question is, what was your first hospitality job, and can you tell me something that you learned there that you've taken with you in your career?
Oh, most definitely. So Black Pearl was my third bartending job. At the time, Black Pearl wasn't the cocktail internationally renowned beast that it is today. We had a laminated cocktail list that also had our beers on there. It also had our wines on there. It was everything in one. There's a lot of cocktails with, 2 types of long life juice and a couple of liqueurs and a flavoured vodka, for example.
Yes, those were the days.
Yeah. Well, those were the days 10 years before that, and we were kind of dragging our heels a little bit. I think before that I'd worked, at the same time it was a cocktail bar, and before that I hadn't ever worked in one. So my experience before that was at F4, working under Marcus Motterum. At the time, I'd say like one of the best kind of nightclubs that crossed over into a little bit of the world of cocktails in the country. Really good music policy, really good team. But at the end of the day, it was a high volume nightclub that did maybe 10% cocktails. And then before that, I guess I was working at Bell Tavern, which was probably Belgrave in the Dandenongs, third to fifth best watering hole. When you talk about kind of what I'd learnt in those 2 previous jobs before moving into cocktail bartending, I'd certainly say one of the best things I learnt, and the thing that stuck with me today, was just the skills of being able to talk to people, I guess. The skills of realising that regulars are the lifeblood of any business, regardless of whether you're a bar, a pub, nightclub, or whether you're a carpentry service, an electrician. Doesn't matter what you do, you look after your regulars and you recognise them. And then when it comes to nightclubs, I guess the biggest thing I learned with F4 was how to make drinks really, really quickly and as precisely as possible, and to a lesser extent, and with an attention to details. But that time it was really get drinks out efficiently. So those 2 things, I think, the psychology of talking to people coupled with doing that in a really efficient manner was a good kind of pillar for where I am today.
So you started off first in a pub, then in a nightclub, and then the cocktail bar. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. So that was a fairly well-worn path for bartenders back then, and not so much these days. You know, a lot of these kind of things can be bypassed for the young up-and-coming mixologist. But I'm going to get the mixologist word out of the way early, by the way. But I think, for me, it was a natural progression. You know, I wanted to initially just get into the industry. I didn't even mean to get into the industry, but, I fell into working into pubs. I really enjoyed it. I wanted to work somewhere cooler in the city. I wanted to work somewhere where I could have some fun, somewhere where I could sleep in, somewhere I could, meet people of the opposite sex. These kind of like really shallow reasons for being in hospitality initially were, I guess, the seeds for later, I guess, sort of inspiration and later passion. And then from there, I did a little stint at Press Club, so a fine dining restaurant, while still working at Black Pearl, and then decided to cast off and take my limited skill set at the time to other shores.
So when you moved to the U.K. after that, is that right?
Yeah, a little stint backpacking. I had a grand plan actually of moving to the Greek islands and doing a season there, and this was not to progress my bartending career by any stretch of the imagination. I think I had some guy come into Black Pearl one night and he was telling me about how great it was working in Mykonos, and I was like, that sounds amazing, let's do it. So I did a stint backpacking before that, and I remember finding myself waking up on a bus from Pamplona to Barcelona, completely parched, completely hungover, completely dehydrated, needing to use the bathroom, on limited sleep, and getting to Barcelona at 7 o'clock in the morning when I was supposed to be going onwards to Greece after that, and saying to my buddy who I was traveling with, who was moving to London, I'm coming with you. Like, I need a friend. I need a friend to be able to hold my hand on my travels, and I need to settle somewhere, and I'd never want to drink again, was, I think, the last thing that was going through my mind. So the idea of moving to London and actually having a crack at working somewhere esteemed and revered appealed to me much more than going and working on a party island for a season.
So going back to the kind of the path you said before, we'll get to London in a second. So, like, for me, like, I started in pubs, and then I did nightclubs, and then I did cocktail bars, and I've always felt that it's a really great progression. You learn customer service, like you said, in the pub. You learn about speed in a nightclub, and then you learn about more detail in the cocktail bar. When you say that bartenders today don't walk that same path, do you think that they miss out on something, or do you think that it's no longer required?
I think, to be honest with you, it's more required than ever before, and I think it's as pertinent as it always has been. I think it's one of the most overlooked skills of bartending, and that is the actual speaking to guests. That is the hospitality side of bartending. And I think bartenders today, myself included, I still bartend, have it a lot easier because guests have smartphones. They come into the bar and they don't need to be entertained. They don't necessarily need to be hosted like they once would have been. So, a lot of bartenders retreat into their own space, or retreat into the actual mixing of a drink side of the actual profession, rather than concentrating on, well, I have to hold a room, I have to hold space at the bar. One of the biggest skills I look for in prospective bartenders is, do they have presence? Can they stand behind the bar and hold a room? And not in the same way that I might, acting like a bit of a fool or being that Jack the Lad style of a bartender. Do they just have presence? Do they command respect? Are they the sort of person that you want to be served by? And full stop. So I think that's hugely important. And yeah, it can be overlooked if you don't grow up, working in those more kind of blue collar establishments.
I gotta say, like I remember the first time you served me a drink. So I think you were working with us on the Alchemy program when Amber and I came into Black Pearl, and we sat at the bar, and it was amazing. It's one of it's one of the few moments where I've watched a bartender work that stays with me today. As a there's a couple of people that I could pull out where I go, fuck, I got a distinctive memory of the first time I was served by someone. And I remember there was Amber and I sitting there, and you treated us like we were absolute VIPs, like we're the only people in the room. But there were 3 more people sitting down to the left of us. They're rotating almost bar stools. So we're constantly serving them and getting drinks out. you were stitching up Rob Sloan by playing a joke on him, telling these girls he was out in the bathroom or whatever, and you got these girls to come up to the bar and go, "Oh my God, are you the guy from Cosmo?" And you had the trophy on the back, and you managed to make that happen and keep that laughter going, whilst banging out drinks for anyone who needed it. And I was like, the amount of juggling you did there was incredible. I even remember you served me a little biscuit on the side of my espresso martini. I think it was, and it was quite a. For me, it was a very memorable moment. I've very rarely seen anyone who could do customer service and speed and do great cocktails the way that you did. So yeah, so like I think your skills behind the bar is just absolutely incredible, and I think a lot of the reason that you have won all of these awards is because of your incredible customer service skills that you have. And when you describe yourself as the kind of what you call Jack the lad behind the bar, really you are probably the most professional bartender I've ever been served by.
That's very kind, mate.
Oh, mate, no, it's really awesome to be able to kind of reminisce and think. I haven't thought about that in ages actually, but I remember it clearly sitting there.
It's interesting you say it, and I mean that compliment, especially from you, is it obviously it means the world. Trying to promote that in younger bartenders, I think we need to kind of do more of. I'm probably of the school of bartending, and I'm not sure if it's the minority or the majority, where I actually don't really care how well you can make drinks to an extent. I don't really go to bars for drinks. I really don't. Like I do like alcohol, I'll give you that. But if I'm going to a bar, and especially if I'm sitting in a bar, I'm so in tune with the service, and I'm so in tune with, like you said, not just how you treat me, but how you treat everyone. And I've got a very kind of, a very acute sense of what is fair in the bar, and in no way do I want myself to be treated any more important than anyone else. And I'll get just as annoyed if the person next to me is waiting far too long for to be served and they've been overlooked to serve me than if the opposite was the case. And it's weird. Can we promote that? Can we promote personality in people? I mean, are you born with it or is it learnt? I think being exposed and having many conversations with many different walks of life will certainly help you with that particular skill set. And for me, that is the most important trait a bartender can have, is that sense of hospitality and personality. I totally
agree. So back to London. So you arrived in London and you wanted to work in a different type of establishment. Where did you end up? And because at one point you ended up at Milk and Honey. Did you go straight to Milk and Honey, or did you have a few stops along the way?
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. I was lucky and unlucky. I mean, the first couple of weeks in London, anyone that's done their kind of, tour of duty in London, it's almost obligatory for most Australians, isn't it? They come back from London and they tell people about it, and it's almost like war stories. It's like, I was paying 50 quid a week rent and staying with 6 other Australians in a 2-bedroom house. It was the same for me. There was 7 of us, 7 Australians in a 3-bedroom house. We had 3 bedrooms with 2 people each, and we had a mate of our Dave's brother who wasn't paying rent, who was sleeping on the couch. And me and my buddy who I was traveling with in Spain, we got there, and he was a trained electrician and wanted to follow that line of work, but didn't really want to do that for the first couple of months. So he was looking to pick up some bar work. I was also looking for bar work, but probably in the higher end kind of bars. Funnily enough, he got a bar job before I did. I'll tell you what, watching him bartend was a bit of a car crash, to be honest with you. He actually asked me for the first couple of shifts just to come in and sit at the bar of the Walkabout in Shepherd's Bush and just help him if he had any questions. Oh, wow. And I'll tell you what, that was a trial by fire for him. I couldn't, there wasn't enough free pints in the world which was going to make me comfortable enough to sit in front of him. But I eventually picked up a job. There was a guy named David Hobbs, who, funnily enough, is now my business partner at Dead Ringer, who had moved from a cocktail bar in Melbourne. He's British, but had moved from a cocktail bar in Melbourne back to London and started working at Milk and Honey. And at the time, Milk and Honey was probably regarded as Europe's best cocktail bar, or one of a few.
Even the best in the world.
Yeah, probably. People in the US would probably say no, and people in Europe would probably say definitely is. So Milk and Honey was at the absolute top of the list, and I had a connection. I had a bit of an in. I'd known Dave to a certain extent in Melbourne, and I put the feelers out with him to see whether they needed someone. And at the time, I think I would have come from Melbourne, working at Black Pearl, being maybe one of the better bartenders in that bar team. One of the better bartenders in my city. So I thought at the time I was quite a big fish, to be honest with you. And going there and getting through that interview process to start working at that particular place, doing the entrance exam, even just walking through those doors and feeling that aura of the legends that had worked there before there, was hugely intimidating. And I soon found out it was intimidating for a reason. There was a lot to learn, and by far I was the worst staff member there. I was definitely the least skilled. So I relished that. I absolutely loved it. And all the guys and girls that worked there were hugely supportive, were really nurturing. The training programs they had there were great. And I knuckled down. I had that inherent kind of small man syndrome mixed with hugely competitive nature, where I didn't want to be the worst, and Milk and Honey being the flagship bar of the match group, and under that banner of the match group where you've got 30 to 40 bartenders in 8 or 9 different venues, all coming together on the first Tuesday of the month, all doing this huge exam, and then the scores being read out from reverse to first.
Oh, wow.
Really made you kind of go, well, I really need to get my skates in and really need to learn as much as possible, especially when there's guys and girls in the other bars that are hunting for jobs at Milk and Honey. And here's this upstart from Australia that's managed to skip the queue to a certain extent and go straight into working for the flagship joint. So, yeah, all of those things combined, I guess, made me try to learn as much as possible and get as good as possible, as fast as possible.
Did you learn anything at Milk and Honey that you've taken with you to your current business?
Attention to, there's a billion things, but attention to detail is probably the biggest. Sasha Petrasky, the godfather, the modern day godfather of that speakeasy style of cocktail bar, and I guess the revival of the classic cocktail, and the urge and the constant search to perfect the classic cocktail. He's probably the greatest thing I did was to learn under him and under his training manuals. Before that, my creativity really didn't have a classic canvas that it would be born upon. Like, I wouldn't use a classic to start with and then expand on that. I would go, yeah, well, I like the taste of this liqueur and I like the taste of this spirit. Let's throw some of that, and then throw some of these hibiscus flowers that I'd found in a market or something, and just kind of throw things at drinks until they taste good enough. And if they didn't taste great, top it with ginger beer or add like 15 mils of creme de pêche or something like that. So, that creativity, it wasn't structured in any way. So what I take from my time there and I put in my venues now is definitely to our bartenders that you have absolutely no right in creating like your own masterpiece unless you've perfected the classics first. So we pay close attention to classics, obviously to the ice, the glassware, the freshness of ingredients, and the methodology and technique and how they're produced. And the 2 years I worked in London, was all about honing those 4 or 5 things.
Wow. So when I look at your career there, having been able to follow it for quite a while, it seems like, everything you touch turns to gold and you go from success to success. Have you ever had a failure or an apparent failure along the way that you feel have set you up for later success? Like, people tend to say that we learn more from mistakes than we do from our kind of wins. Like, do you have a favorite failure that you look back on and go, fuck, I fucked that up, but it turned good on the other side for me?
I think the term character building gets thrown around a lot. You're right. Like, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I remember having this run of golden years, like ever since like 2003, 2004. I remember like getting to like the end of the year in December, and you kind of take stock and you go, wow, that was a great year. Whether it was professionally or not necessarily romantically, because I didn't really have much romantic success until I met Lynn, my wife. But you kind of do a stock take and you go, all right, how am I doing financially? How am I doing health-wise? How am I doing professionally? How am I doing in the love life? And if there's more goods than bads, then it's been a great year, right? And I'm fairly simplistic in that kind of analysis. And it got to a stage where after, even after we opened Bulletin Place, it was going gangbusters. We weren't bankrupt. We were putting money in the bank. We were saving towards. We didn't know what we were saving towards. But I remember Lynn saying to me, she said, you've had such a great run, similar to what you've said. Do you think it will be like this forever, kind of thing? And I was like, well, no, but I'd really like to have a setback. I'd really like to be put back so I can learn from it, because I do. I think it's something that will 100%, make me a better person or a better professional or a better boss. And you don't learn much from things going right. You learn a lot from things going wrong. And sure enough, I mean, I wouldn't call it. It's not a failure because it's still going today. But certainly the first year of Dead Ringer, opening our first restaurant was one of the toughest things, if not the toughest thing, we've ever gone through. Financially, I was quite jaded with the industry. I had a lot of pent up kind of anger and hate, which wasn't there before, and it wasn't just a underlying cynicism. It was a genuine disdain for people I quite like in the industry, and it really kind of took me aback, and I was surprised at how badly I kind of handled it. I mean, that's up for debate, but I thought that I could have handled all of that better. Fortunately enough, things started to turn with Dead Ringer, and it's nothing new that people struggle in their first year of restaurants. No. Like, there's absolutely nothing new. Anyone will tell you that. I guess I just wasn't as prepared for it because I had this kind of bulletproof mentality that I'd worn for maybe the 10 years before that or whatever.
In terms of opening that, really, like opening a restaurant versus opening a bar. I mean, what led you to going that way in the first place? Like, what made you go, fuck, let's do food? Yeah.
So I'm more passionate about food than I am about drink, to be honest with you now. But I mean, saying that, I'm quite passionate about, if I was passionate about shoes, I wouldn't become a cobbler. I wouldn't change profession. So I wouldn't say to always just sort of follow that passion and make that your profession to a certain extent. But we thought we had like the industry clout. We thought we had the experience in restaurants, and we thought we could do it. And what we also had was a great chef who wanted to work with us, and his vision was aligned with ours. More importantly, the reason we didn't open another bar was there was the change in legislation in Sydney meant that we couldn't just open up another Bulletin Place with another 50 seats. Bulletin Place was super successful. Like, we'd be stupid to not just do that, cut and paste. But we couldn't do that at the time. There was no new licenses. No one wanted to sell their license. So we needed to take over a space that had an existing license, and one of the best ones was a restaurant license with a PSA, or a primary service of alcohol, as you would know. So initially we opened up Dead Ringer, hoping it would be a 70-30 drink to food kind of a joint. However, unfortunately or fortunately, Tristan Rosier's food was so good that people were coming back and taking note of the food. So we had to extend that offering, and we had to give the customers what we want. And again, a venue changing its personality in the first year or two is nothing different as well. You kind of go with the ocean, so to speak. So within a couple of years, we had gotten it to about a 50-50 split, which we're pretty comfortable with. But now we're 100% perceived as a restaurant. We changed our name from Dead Ringer to Dead Ringer Restaurant and Bar. So switched the bar and restaurant kind of around. Yeah. And even today, we are used a lot of the time for drinks, but most of the time as somewhere to have brunch or dinner.
I definitely go there for dinner. In terms of operating a restaurant, how do you find the difference between operating a restaurant and a bar? Is it the same, or do you find it to be a completely different?
I can actually, as we say this, I can hear my business partners laughing at the end, going, "Tim doesn't do anything at Dead Ringer. Why are you asking him for?" I'd say to a big extent, they're completely right. I've got two great business partners in Dave and Rob, who look after front of house and back of house, respectively, and a fantastic general manager, Adam, who does an amazing job nurturing all the staff, HR, dealing with the kitchen, all of those things. And my input at Dead Ringer, besides going to the weekly whips, a lot of the time is creatively. So it's coming up with new cocktails or having a say, I guess, on our back bar. In terms of, I do focus. I do some work. I haven't retired to pasture just yet. Which they're not doing that well, that's for sure. But my focus is at Bulletin Place. But if I was to look at it from if I took a step back and I could sort of talk about how the guys handle it comparatively to how we handle it at Bulletin Place, I'd say you've just got a lot more stakeholders, and HR is such an underrated element of any business, I'd say, and why anyone would want to become a HR manager, which is by far the worst part of any business, and want to do that professionally. I take my hat off to them. You've got this sadist personality for sure if you want to do that in recruiting. So managing the stakeholders and touching, it's touching tables with the chefs, making sure that obviously they've got enough people in there, they're not feeling overworked, they're creatively fueled. Touching tables with your casuals. One of the most important things is to make sure that your casuals, the guys and girls that are coming in for 20 hours a week, are coming in with energy. These part-time roles, these roles where most bars have got them, where you've got that that one guy that does a shift on Saturday and a Tuesday afternoon or something, making sure those people are coming in and injecting energy, because they're not there 40, 50 hours a week. They're not the ones that are absolutely sick of those four walls. So making sure that they're inspired, they know their roles, they're coming in, shooting from the hip. Obviously checking in with your management team, checking in with your bartenders, checking in with your business partners. The stakeholders, there's absolutely so much more. But when it comes to managing Bulletin Place, it's a group of guys and girls that are all passionate about one thing, and that's putting great things in a glass and getting that out to customers, serving nice drinks to nice people, and that's basically it. So yeah, it is tough. It's a lot of balls in the air to juggle.
Oh, it's a completely different game.
You know full well now, mate.
Yeah. No, I've done the same. But yeah, and legislation was the same thing for us, and I think it's the same for a lot of people now who are going from bars to restaurant. We just don't have a choice given the legislation that's here in Sydney, right?
But we're doing damn good at it. This is the thing, because I remember having a chat with Pat Norse a while ago when we were so Pat Norse, the editor of Gourmet Traveller, when we were opening Dead Ringer, or we're planning to opening it, I was sitting with him at Bulletin Place, and I said, "Hey mate, we're opening another venue," and he's like, "Oh, where's it going to be?" I was like, "Well, we're still finding a site, but it's going to be a restaurant bar," and he's like, "Why the fuck would you do that?" And he's trying to talk me out of it at the bar, and I should have taken his advice, to be honest with you. No, I shouldn't have. But he said he almost said that isn't. It was almost like a warning to sort of say stay out of other people's lanes to a certain regard. But now we're seeing more and more of it. Whether it's James Brady opening up a place in Northland, Bistecca, which has just opened up, or if it's the Swillhouse Group opening up, Hubert, whether it's yourself opening up Mjolnir. There's so many more Big Poppers from Lewis. There's so many more bar guys and girls opening up food orientated places. So it's certainly not a bridge too far for any of us. And these places are being critically judged to be some of the best places in the city. So where there's a will, there's a way. And I think the experience that bartenders and bar owners have accumulated can certainly translate to the restaurant world.
Oh, totally.
It's just harder to make a bloody buck.
Yeah. It's a completely different game. I think that's a big challenge. You talked just about inspiring the staff and inspiring the casuals. How do you go about inspiring your staff? I mean, obviously you're an inspirational guy, but how do you transfer that to your staff?
Yeah, I just tell them all to follow me on Instagram at Tim D Phillips. They're part of my fellowship, and once they, it's a good question. I am still learning that, and I think I always will be. I don't think I've ever been the best mentor. I think I've always been a really good 2IC. That was kind of been like my wheelhouse. Most of my career is the best work I've ever done has been when I've been that creative force which is behind that kind of manager. And I want to get better, and I'm trying to get better at helping younger staff, be the best they can be, and finding what drives them and giving them the tools. at Bulletin Place, for example, I just want to make sure that all of our staff are feeling completely nurtured. They're given enough time in the week where they have a creative output, giving them tasks to focus on. I heard recently that I was talking about the secret to happiness, and there's that misnomer where it's like, well, you retire at 45 with $1 billion in the bank account, and you spend the last half of your life on boats smoking cigars and doing nothing. It's what you
don't need $1 billion for that, right?
Yeah. But I actually read that the secret to sort of happiness and the secret to sort of fulfillment is to continue working. It's not to retire at all. And if you continue to work, obviously not too many hours, but you continue to be challenged and given tasks, and you continually meet those tasks and then be recognised for them, then that will drive happiness in staff. So when you talk about trying to inspire staff, I'd like to think what I try to do, and what I think all employers should do, is to continually challenge your staff, make it achievable, and then when that task is achieved, make sure you damn well recognise it. And personally, publicly, it doesn't have to be giving them cash incentives. It doesn't have to be giving them a trophy at like a staff awards at the end of the year. It can just be making an example of them on the group communication channel within the group. And I think that's super important. And I certainly get a lot out of that when I'm given a compliment like that. And I'd like to think our staff get a lot out of it as well.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
And
totally.
Giving them a bottle of champagne at the end of the year doesn't hurt as well.
Doesn't hurt at all. Going back to your time in, I want to talk a little bit before we get back into the bar side about your career as a bartender. So I think I said this before we started. Like I think you may be the world's most awarded bartender. So you've won Australian Bartender of the Year, U.K Bartender of the Year. I don't know many people who have 2 national titles. And you won the global World Class competition, basically making you the world's best bartender by title. Not fucking bad. What do you think sets you apart from the rest of the competition? Like, what is in your opinion, like your key strength and advantage when you're competing in a cocktail or bartending competition? Like those are, like, winning a competition once is one thing, but winning them that many times is that's not by mistake. That's not just judges going, man, something's taking place.
Yeah, there's always a bit of luck as well. It's now that I've been out of cocktail competitions for sort of 5-6 years, I guess one of the I've had a chance to think about it. One of the keys, I think, is learning from your mistakes. There's a lot of cocktail competitions which I lost, which I tried to learn from. I think the biggest thing that I would try to do that would be different to the opposition was I used to study the opposition. I shouldn't say opposition. I should say fellow bartenders. Maybe that's competitive. Just that kind of Freudian slip of me going, my competitors, like that. But watching other bartenders compete, I learnt pretty quickly that watching the judges' faces, that cocktail competitions are boring. If you're sitting down judging cocktail competitions, it sounds delightful, but it's actually really dry. And especially because every bartender is normally using one product. They're mostly building cocktails on a sweet and sour platform.
Yeah.
So a real kind of neutral platform where if you taste 4 or 5 of those kind of sweet and sour style drinks, they all start tasting the same. And a good example would be sit down and make yourself a gimlet, a daiquiri, an Army and Navy, a brandy cruster, and a rum daisy or something, and taste them after each other. By the 5th one, they all taste the same. So standing out from that, you absolutely need to. So trying to have flavour profiles in drinks that would challenge the judge slightly and make them jump out, but also through the challenging of just the way you speak, the way you hold yourself, the way you capture their intention, making it fun, making them laugh. And it's a lot of the time it's not about being charming, but it's about being charmed, and making the judge feel good about themselves, I think is hugely important.
Yeah.
You don't need to be that super charming narcissistic bartender. Just kind of getting the judges into a level of interaction where they feel like they've been a part of it, or they feel like they've contributed to this amazing drink which is in front of them, I think is really important. And being a bit irreverent and just having fun, I think it really helped me set everything aside, set apart, I guess.
When you I judged the some of the stuff you said. They just rang so through. I judged the global final for Bacardi Legacy one year, and it was just daiquiri after daiquiri after daiquiri after daiquiri. It was just all twists on the daiquiri. And at one point I was like, man, these are all tasting the same. And then the drink that came out that had nothing to do with the daiquiri is the drink that won.
Yeah.
It was just so far away from everything else. It just completely stood out as its own thing.
Yeah.
And it was a beautiful drink.
Yeah.
But I think, the fact that the others were so close to being daiquiris and just slight twists on it, gave that drink an additional advantage.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I've learned a lot off a lot of people over the years, and that the person that took cocktail competitions the most serious, and it's someone I know you admire greatly, is a guy named Dean Callan.
Yeah, I love Dean.
So Dean took. I remember watching Dean in a whatever competition it was in Australia. We're talking like 13, 14 years ago, when he brought his own ice to the competition. And this is before, bars were ordering ice off Navy Strength or Bare Bones, or before they were buying big blocks and cutting them down. He just had a really good machine. And he thought, well, if I'm going to go make this drink, I'm going to take an esky of my own really good machine's ice to this venue. And watching that opened my eyes a little bit. And his attitude was, well, I want the drink to be the best. I want my drink to stand out. And it was simple to him. He's entered a competition to win it. He's not entering a competition because he just wants to show his bourbon and tomato cocktail. He wants to win it, and to make the best cocktail, he needs to have the best ice he can be. So I think that was a bit of an eye-opening moment. And like I said, every time I'd lost a competition, I certainly had a look at what the winners had done, and really watched them perform to take away.
So talking about that, I mean, let's talk about World Class for a second. So I was obviously very heavily involved with the World Class here in Australia, and the first year you won the national final here. It was a close call. We had to go with those scores a lot. We were talking decimal points, right?
Actually, I didn't think I'd won.
I
was at the back of the room with a Don Julio and tonic in my hand. I'd taken my shoes off, I think, at that stage.
No, it was a very close call. The second time, however, it was total annihilation. There wasn't. I think you were number one in 3 out of 4 categories and number 3rd in the 4th category.
What happened in the 4th?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Get that score sheet.
But it was brutal. I've judged that many cocktail competitions in my life, and I think aside from Ben Davidson winning Bartender of the Year many years ago with Bartender magazine, I've never looked at a score sheet that was that fucking lopsided. You were such a clear winner. Now, obviously, when you win the national final, you go to the global final. You didn't win the global final the first year, but you did win it the second time. What did you learn from that first kind of defeat, if you like, at the global final? Did you learn something that helped you in the second time around?
There's a famous song by The Rapture. I've forgotten the name of it, but there's a line in it that goes, a party's no good because the drinks are free. The free spirits will never set anyone's spirits free. And basically saying, don't just go to a party because the booze is there. However, that attitude with me in India certainly didn't apply, because I 100% had the best time in India. I had too good of a time. For a guy that was competing on the national, on an international stage, representing his country, I shouldn't have been having that much fun. The equivalent would be like an Olympian going to the Olympics just to get laid. Okay, now
apparently that does happen.
Yeah. But going just for that is a different story.
Yeah.
The competition side of things, and I did I did put in some work when it came to the cocktails, but I thought after that first Australian final that I would never ever compete in a competition as tough as that. And I joked that I thought I didn't win. I legitimately thought there's 3 or 4 people in this top 10 who I thought have got it in the bag. So it was a true surprise to me. So me going into that global final, and especially in a country like India where I'd always wanted to go, I'd always wanted to go ever since I worked for you, actually, and you told me you were doing some work in India and you hated it. It was too hot for you.
It was so tough.
Linen suits didn't breathe as well as you wanted them to when you're over there, something like that. But I'd always wanted to go, and I'd put my hand up for any Indian work in the future. And
you did China, right?
Yeah, I went to Chengdu, and funnily enough, which is it's we're getting sidetracked here. The most landlocked part of mainland China in the Sichuan province. I didn't have the greatest time there, but now, in hindsight, as a 34-year-old man that loves Szechuan food and Szechuan chilies, I'm like, damn it, why didn't I make the most of that? So I'm a little bit disappointed, I didn't have foresight, 15 years ago or whatever it was.
Well, you did get your face on billboards.
Yeah, I know. I had my own billboards, which was nice. I didn't have a chance to bring any of them home, so it's okay though.
Too big for carry-on. So so back to the World Class. So you've done the first one. What did you do differently the second time around?
So the second time around was a bit different. So we talk about that little golden streak of competition wins that I had after the first international World Class. After I lost. I decided I didn't want to do any more cocktail competitions. It had ruined me. I was really disappointed with myself. I remember after the competition, going back to my room, sitting on the end of the bed, crying, with a bottle of Don Julio Añejo in my hand, just sitting there, hating myself for not making the most of the opportunity. And again, thinking that the competition being so tough to get to that point, I wouldn't be able to ever do it again. So fast forward the next year, the only other competition I was going to enter was the Australian Bartender magazine Bartender of the Year. It's a really iconic competition in Australia. You're nobody unless you kind of win that bad boy, and it puts your name on the map, and it's a really great career stepping stone. And a lot of my friends had won it whilst I'd been overseas, and I had been overseas, and I wanted to kind of stamp my own brand on the Australian bartending scene, more so than just winning a branded competition like Diageo's World Class. So I entered that, and the prize for that, I think, was a trip to a distillery trip, and a trophy, and that was basically it. So entered that, was fortunate enough to win that, and I remember being told that not only do you win your distillery trip and this beautiful trophy, however, you are automatically promoted to be in the top 10 final of World Class 2012.
That's right.
And I remember going, oh no, here we bloody go again. And, so we talk about like the World Class Finals 2012 in Australia, the Australian finals being super kind of easy for me to win, or I won by a mile. The fact of the matter is I had another 6 months to prepare for it. And although I didn't know the challenges necessarily, I had a kind of inclination of the concepts I wanted to do, and then I'd try to make them malleable into something that would fit the Australian finals. The difference with the global final was I'd seen what it took to win. I knew the standard, and I wanted to not only kind of meet that standard, I wanted to smash it. I wanted to absolutely leave no stone unturned, put in as much work as I can. So at that time I was working only 20, 25 hours a week leading up to that. I was putting absolutely everything into it, whether it was a concept, whether it was something fun, and after everything, because your involvement as well. I remember us having a dinner just before I was about to leave.
That's right. And
we're sitting at this table, and I'm talking through concept to concept. And I told you about this concept that was like, I was going to do a hot toddy, but the hot toddy was going to reflect Australian food culture.
Goon?
So I was going to serve a warm hot toddy in a Johnny Walker Goon box in a microwave. Oh, yeah. And you said, who's the judge? And I said, it's Peter Dorelli and Salvatore Calabresi. And you put down your fork and you said, you cannot serve a hot toddy goon in a microwave to the maestro Salvatore Calabresi. You need to change that.
Oh, God.
And I went away and I thought about it and I said, I'll stuff it. I'm so sorry, mate. Like, you've been right about a lot of things in your life. But that one I'm going to take.
Oh, awesome. See, I should not give advice where it's not needed, I think. I've never won one of these competitions. Oh, that's awesome. And what else did you? So what did you change about? Did you change anything else for the compared to year one? I assume you party less.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the way you hold yourself, I guess, and the respect you give to not only yourself but to the brands and to the company and to everyone that puts these mammoth things on. I certainly paid attention to. I made sure that. I wasn't the first to the party and the last to leave. I was really trying to get the best out of this week, and I'd kind of put aside a couple of days at the end of the competition. Of course, it was in Rio de Janeiro, so there needed to be an element of me, drinking caipirinhas on Copacabana Beach. But I wanted to really save that until the end of the competition, and getting to that last night, getting to that final challenge. 8 challenges later, I remember thinking to myself, sitting on the bed, putting on my suit before going to the awards night. It doesn't matter if I finish, the year before I'd finished 6th, so if I finished worse than that or slightly better than that, it wouldn't have mattered to me at all because I knew I'd put everything into it. And I'd realised that was what was driving that disappointment from last year was I hadn't put everything into it. I hadn't put my full attention. I hadn't creatively pushed myself as much, and I hadn't treated the competition, the brand, the judges, and myself with the respect that it deserved. And I'd let down myself and ultimately Australia that year, I feel like. So, I put it all on the table, and I didn't really care whether I'd won or not.
I think that's awesome because I think it's so correct. I think the outcome is the outcome, right? But you can't really change the outcome. You can't. What you can change is you can change the effort that you put in. And if you give it your all, then there's no regrets.
And if exactly right. And if on the day you're not deemed to be good enough, then so be it.
Yeah, as long as you
say the best bartender in the world. I don't think that's true at all. I think that week I was the best competition bartender with their brands, and I had the best concepts. And ultimately, you get given that kind of title, but you can't believe things like that if you believe that you.
Oh, you can't drink the Kool-Aid, but it's still nice to get the. It's still an amazing accomplishment.
Yeah, it's written on my book. Yeah. So I'm keeping it.
In terms of and how did that? We're going to move into the bar, talk about your bars, but before we do that, like obviously that was you've won Bartender of the Year in Australia, then you win this big thing. How did that change your life? Did winning this competition alter the course of your life at all? Did it have an impact on you as a person and kind of suppose the life that followed?
Yeah, I think so. I think financially, it did. It meant great PR for Bulletin Place. We opened that year. I actually signed the lease with Rob the day I flew to Rio.
Wow! So
it was. I obviously came back. What was 10 days later, and Rob picked me up from the airport, and he was like, "Mate, we need to recruit another business partner. Because you're going to be travelling." So hence we spoke to 80 Ruiz, and that was super fortuitous. We wouldn't have had 80 on board at Bulletin Place, and Bulletin wouldn't be the thing it is today without him. No way. So winning obviously helped us recruit that and made Bulletin Place better because I'd be working in it less. And so 80 was with us. So financially we were better off because we were getting this PR. But I think kind of psychologically or spiritually, I think what it did to me was it gave me peace. And I think, hospitality and bartending does fight with being regarded as a profession. And
it does.
I certainly had thought, I could be better and I could be more highly regarded and I deserve to kind of be regarded. And I don't think it's necessarily narcissism or it's just an internal kind of like desire to be the best you can be and regarded for it. So
ambition.
Having that, yeah, exactly. And having that kind of recognition, I think is a little bit shallow, to be honest with you, but needing that recognition. But I mean, everyone needs a little bit of recognition. I just needed the world's biggest spirit company on the world's biggest cocktail comp to tell me I was good.
I think you needed to tell you it was good, but the fact that they did tell you were good, and not just good, they told you were great, and in the media, supported that statement as well. I mean, as someone who starts up a business, it's fucking incredible.
Yeah, it's awesome. It's really awesome. And to be honest with you, I don't think about it a lot. I don't, and it's obviously like altered my life greatly. But I think you've got to always be. I mean, you can reflect once you're retired, can't you? And a cocktail competition is it's a great achievement, but you can't let that kind of thing get to your head. But in terms of what it did to me, it certainly, gave me a little bit of peace, I guess, is the number one thing.
And so then you decide to open a bar. I mean, at what point? How did you and Rob come to that crazy decision?
So we were living together at the time. I didn't recommend not opening a bar with a dude you live with, by the way. It's like, I don't want to see someone 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, unless I'm sleeping with them. Okay,
I did open a bar with my wife as well.
Yeah. So the first kind of so myself and Rob at the time was doing some brand work. I was treading water in the Sydney bartending scene and not overly fulfilled, or any kind of creative fulfillment I had was in cocktail competitions, and I was working in a very profitable bar, and it was making me a whole lot of tips, and I'd been really, really good at putting away those tips, and Rob had been doing the same with his work. So we had this sum of money together, less than $100,000, and we wanted to open our own space, and the cheapest space we could find was this like first floor walk up in the north end of the city, that had 50 square meters, and 2 toilets, and that was it. So we spent all of our money on ice machines and stainless steel, and Rob was seeing a girl who was a designer at the time, so she helped us for chump change, but again, helped us. I mean, it was a 1 square room and we had no budget, so find the best furniture on the side of the road and paint it up the best you can. So that was it, really. We just kind of got sick of working in places where we were always told what we had to make or what we had to do. We just wanted to open a place that maybe had a few of each spirit category, maybe a box of single malt whiskies, because that's what we were really into. We got sick of always making the same cocktail, so we decided let's just change the cocktail list every day and only do 5 drinks. We had a passion for Australian biodiversity, so we were like, let's just get the produce from the markets from paddies every day, and now we don't have to go every day, which is good. And that was it, basically. We just wanted to have like a real kind of quality over quantity kind of a space, 2 red wines, 2 white wines, 2 beers, 5 cocktails, 3 of each spirit category, done, open up, and not necessarily be a cocktail bar, just be a neighbourhood bar in the middle of the city that had good service, fun-loving guys that had a real professional background, and obviously the recruitment of 80 as well meant that we had some super talented people working for us. Along with
Rob, 80 behind the bar. Jesus, what a team. And you say not necessarily a cocktail
Rob not
bar.
behind the bar. I remember Rob putting egg white in a margarita one night, and we were like, "Yeah, man, you're really, you're a really good-looking guy. You're really charming. Maybe you should stay on the floor, bro. Like, you kind of."
Hey, I love egg white in my margaritas, bro. I may have gotten that from me. That's bad.
It's just because you need extra protein hits all the way through the day, mate.
Oh, that's hilarious. So you said not a cocktail bar necessarily, and then you went cocktail bar of the year 4 times, I think, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think? What do you think sets Bulletin a place apart from other bars in that regard?
Yeah, we know the company that makes the trophies. So we, I don't know, because I've always got this like insecurity that people actually like hate me because I don't go to industry events. I'm not a very good schmoozer. Like, I find sometimes I find things all a bit awkward, and I'm quite dismissive of things I don't like, and I don't know why. Like, I mean, maybe because I've been in Bulletin Place, those 4 walls, for 6 years, nearly every day, that I'm so sick of that joint. But whenever I work with like the younger staff, and what we sold then compared to what we sell now, we still sell 2 red wines, 2 white wines, 2 beers, 5 cocktails, same amount of spirits, same amount of box of scotches, but the work that goes into the drinks these days is so completely different. So what separates us, I think, is that kind of the way that we've adapted and kept moving, and it's not like we're just putting up strawberry daiquiris and passion fruit gimlets like we were in 2012 and 13. The guys really think about it, whether it's making their own ferments or kombuchas or wines, or the jams, the preserves, all of our own pickles, and the attention that goes into produce these days and getting the best out of it, still highlighting Australia's biodiversity and the seasonality that lies within it, But the way they're able to extract these flavors, and you only have to go into we've taken over level 2 above Bulletin Place as our test kitchen and office.
Oh wow!
But we've also got access to the attic, and you only have to walk into the attic to smell the flavored vinegars to go like, wow, things have changed. Comparatively to what happened in 2013. So I'm proud of that, and I guess what separates us is our constant devotion to celebrating Australia's primary producers and biodiversity.
It's amazing how to see how, when I look at when I was bartending, which admittedly was, ice was barely invented at the time, right? It's been a long time, and we would never.
This is in Norway, though. You didn't need it, bro. You didn't need to be making ice.
We were just chipping it off the windowsill outside, chip. But we wouldn't ferment anything. We wouldn't make our own ingredients.
Well, you would ferment accidentally.
Yeah,
when you leave pineapple juice.
Totally, yeah. Leave it out in room temperature for too long.
Exactly.
It's incredible to see how far it's come. Do you find like now from being a cocktail bar that having a kitchen is necessary in order to be able to perform at a high level? So you have a test kitchen, like being able to have equipment to cook and make ingredients now are like an essential part of a high-end cocktail bar?
Potentially not the equipment. I think having a really professional sanitary space is important. 10, 15 years ago, we would just be using the bar area, or we would potentially have a corner of the kitchen if the chefs would let us, if we worked in a place that had that. I think now what's really important is the closer we are becoming towards a liquid kitchen, and it's all great that we've looked at chefs for inspiration, but we look at a number of places for inspiration, but what we can take out of what chefs do is their dedication to organisation, labelling, cleanliness and hygiene, stainless steel surfaces, for example, and I think it's super important that if you have elements of that in your bar, that there needs to be a space that is that hygienic spot. When it comes to equipment, you can do some pretty cool stuff with some pretty crude equipment. You only have to look at the first couple of years of White Lion and Ryan Chetty and Ian, they weren't using super whiz-bang gear to get these incredible flavours and amazing cocktails. They're using fairly cheap to get hold of kitchen equipment. So, it's all up to kind of how creative you can be. But I think it is important to have that dedicated hygienic space.
Yeah, totally. So when you can you name a few things, like 2 or 3 things that you know now that you wish you knew when you opened your first bar? Like, what are they? Why you wish you'd know them sooner?
That's a good question. We could probably do a podcast on this alone, couldn't we? I think when it comes to choosing your business partners, and I've been really fortunate, but we went into this without thinking about it at all. And in hindsight, it really shouldn't have worked. Is that the business partners, both at Dead Ringer and Bulletin Place, and at Bulletin Place it's myself, Rob and Adi, and at Dead Ringer it's myself, Rob and Dave. We all come from similar backgrounds. We've got kind of a similar skill set in a certain extent, and over the years we've managed to veer off into different skill sets. So when you choose your business partners, you need to really decide why you're choosing them. Are you choosing them because they've got sort of money? Are they just sort of dumb money that can be silent? Have they got experience in opening venues? Are they a lawyer, which could help? Are they a tradie, which could definitely help? Or are they better at back of house? Are they great operations people? Are they creatively minded and they're going to take over that aspect? Or have they got knowledge in wine? Or whatever the case may be. If you're opening a nightclub, are they a promoter? Can they fill the place? So paying attention to that was, I think, is really important. We didn't do that at all, and the sheer fact that we're still mates after 6 years is testament to how lucky we are, and I guess how much focus we've had on having open dialogue and being really honest with each other, and also trying to be as adaptable as possible into moving into gaps that we need in the business. So you need to be really attentive to that. I think if we would open another restaurant, I'd probably want to have a chef as a business partner. That would probably be a good idea. You know, dealing with the pains of losing a head chef and then trying to recruit another one was super stressful. And again, I can hear Dave and Rob laughing because it happened whilst I was on a sabbatical year last year. However, the head chef that we've got now is phenomenal, and we're very fortunate. But we didn't have someone like that for a couple of months, and that was. That's everything to a restaurant. The quality that goes out, and I've got so many connections in bars, and I can bartend, so I can always fill that gap when it comes to the front of house. But certainly not the case in the kitchen. And unless we were going to open up a spaghetti bolognese restaurant, because mine's pretty damn good, I don't think we'd be able to get by.
I'm in the same position. I could do pancakes, no stress. But well, that's where it stops, right? Like I could do awesome breakfast, but that's pretty much it. Can you give us some examples of advice you were given by peers before opening your first venue? Maybe an example of a helpful advice and an example of some unhelpful advice. Don't need to name the people, but yeah, some advice you were given before.
Well, you told me.
Oh God.
That you told me that Bulletin Place wasn't big enough. I think once you were like, it's never going to make money. It's not big enough, man. It's not big enough. And to a certain extent, you're right. It's not big enough to make money where we can step away from it. I think you're spot on there. There's like a golden point, I think, in bars where if it's under 60 or 70, you've basically bought yourself a job. You've opened yourself a job. If it's over 150, it's going to be really bloody hard to fill and for it not to look empty on quiet nights. And so if you kind of open something between 70 and 150 and you can, get it half to 3/4 full most nights, that's a pretty sweet spot, I think,
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I tend to stay in the 120 mark.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, 120 is a small bar, isn't it? So under that, you
by New South Wales legislation, I think you're maybe 100. I'm not sure. I think it's 120 now.
Yeah. The best piece of advice I was ever given was by a guy named Marty O'Sullivan, who whilst we were all tentative, and Marty O'Sullivan owns Grasshopper in the city, owns a couple of other places, I think. Excuse my ignorance there, Marty, if you're listening. But here's a piece of advice when we were looking to opening up Bulletin Place was to just bloody do it. Just do it. And he kept pushing us, and we'd have almost these weekly coffee breaks where he'd just be saying, yeah, I know, it's bullshit, it's tough, there's heaps of paperwork, yeah, of course you got to speak to the Department of Health, yeah, of course you got to speak to the cops, yeah, of course you got to speak to them, but just do it. And he kept kind of pushing us, and he was completely right, and that was completely helpful for us. We just needed that someone who did it before, who was kind of oblivious to any issues, to just say, yeah, just keep going forward. It doesn't matter if you take 2 steps back, you'll crawl it back, you'll claw it back.
And do you have any advice to anyone who's in a similar position, who's been working in the industry for a while, done well, and won't open their own bar? If you could say like one thing to somebody who wants to open their own bar, what would it be? Outside of like just do it.
I'd say that critics, and we're not talking about Time Out or Broadsheet or anyone like that. Critics are your guests, okay? I'd say critics are very forgiving of people that open something that they're passionate about. So if you open anything, if you open up a techno bar that sells hot potatoes and you're really passionate about it, even if it's 5 square meters, people are receptive to that. People get it. And if the product's good and you're passionate about it, then it will do well. So only open something unless that is 100% what you're all about. 100% something that drives you every day and says, you know what, like, I make the world's best mojito. My wife makes the world's best burrito. I'm going to open up this mojito and burrito shack. It's the only 2 things we're going to sell. I'm going to sell 1 mojito, 1 burrito. And it's going to be the best because her burrito's the best, my mojito's the best. People will be receptive of that.
I totally agree. I think I have this thing, I go, there's always a gap in the market for awesome.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the idea that the opening something that you love doing is fucking great.
Yeah.
Opening a venue because it might make you money it's a wrong place to start.
That's the worst motive.
Yeah,
it's absolutely the worst motive. There's absolutely not an easy buck in this game. There's no way. Unless you're selling ecstasy in your venue as well, that's really easy to make money off, I've heard.
They're accompanying water sales.
No. But you're exactly right. I think it's absolutely silly, and especially in this industry where it is all about people, it's all about service, it's all about product. Unless people can feel the passion when they walk in, unless they can connect with the venue and the space and the staff, then it's pretty much doomed. I'm sorry.
Mate, I got a couple of more questions for you, and then we'll wrap it up. I've got some interesting questions I'd like to ask you, man, because I'm curious to hear your answers.
Sure.
Can you share a thing about you that those listening would find surprising? So something unusual that you do or that you love. So I'll give you one of mine, maybe to kick it off. So this is weird, but I love talent show highlight auditions from auditions.
You're talking like Australia's Got Talent, or you're talking like Australian Idol or something?
Any fucking singing show, doesn't matter what it is, I love the fucking highlights. I
Really?
love to see the one person that comes out there who looks like they're going to fucking just die, and then fucking crushes it.
Gotcha.
I love that shit.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's okay. That's a good thing.
My wife doesn't think it's very endearing.
She hates it?
She thinks I'm lame.
Really? Yeah. Those dance shows are dope though, man. I'm with you on that one. I'm not so much for the singing, but the talent and the dancing I'm all about. Good question. I think I've found the older I get, the more focused I am on my own health, and I've found a real passion for where 10 years ago it would have been learning the mash bills of every American whiskey on our back bar. My passion today lies in meditation through running. So I don't have ADD, and I think that gets thrown around so often when people say, "Oh, I've got ADHD." I don't think I have that, but I certainly have some issue with holding attention, and especially if it comes to like sitting down during the day, being at a computer or something like that. So my way of clearing my head, setting myself up for success is through running. I absolutely love running, and if that was taken away from me, I'd really struggle. And so definitely that's one of my biggest passions. Other things probably that I probably spend have a good little crying session every Sunday night watching 60 Minutes. That's like my favourite thing to do. 60 Minutes night's the best. I even watch extra minutes at the end as well. I jump online and I'm like, I've got to see the backstory to this story. Oh, awesome. So yeah, I think that's it in terms of like any kind of guilty pleasures or things like that. I used to be a fat kid, so like I have like a huge passion for like bad chocolate, like commercial chocolate, all the big brands. If there's like a new Mars bar, I'm buying it. Like I'll buy it right there at the service station and eat it in the service station like the fat kid that I always will be.
Man, you're not fat. How often do you run now? Like how far do you run?
It depends what I'm running for. So I've got the Sydney Marathon coming up.
Oh wow!
5 weeks or something. So it'll be my third marathon, and so at the moment it's all about doing one long run a week. So Sunday I did 27k,
Jesus.
And then this Sunday I'll do 30, and then during the week I'll do whether it's hill sprints or whether it's just kind of normal sprints or whether it's short, sharp stuff.
Interval training.
But as a week to week, I'll try to do 50Ks a week, and that'll just be single pace kind of stuff. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and
that's epic, man.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's efficient at burning calories, and that's the main thing for me. Is that like as being someone that's grown up just trying to do things as quick as possible to the best of your ability. When you're told that if you just run for an hour, you will burn 1,000 calories, and I'm like, oh, that's incredible. And then you wrestle with the fat kid as well, and you're like, well, that's 3 brownie Mars bars. That's incredible. So I can just do that, and I'll get that. So it works for me.
That's awesome.
And people say they hate running. I hated running as well. I really hated running. It took me 10 years of running for me to actually start enjoying it, and that seems like a bit of a chore, obviously. But if you sort of just go out and you end up doing like 15 minutes running super slow, run around the block and come back, I highly promote it as a way of clearing the head, whether you want to like listen to nothing or listen to a podcast or an audiobook or the new Beyonce album. It doesn't matter. Like, it's just going to help clear that.
Best, man.
Yeah.
I love it. I don't run much anymore because I'm old and broken, but it's one of my favorite ways of clearing my head.
We're going to go for a run straight after this, you said, right? That's
Did I?
Yeah.
I'm not dressed for it, bro. In your opinion, what's some of the worst advice that you hear given to people in our industry? Left of field there, this one.
Well, that's a good question. I think some of the worst advice and that you can, or some of the worst sort of decisions you can make as a bartender is to jumping into management too soon. I think if one of the reasons why you got into working into cocktail bars is because you wanted to, I guess, really push your creative side of things. If you get pushed into management, for example, and you don't see yourself as a manager or a bar owner within the next 5 years, then you might be doing that too soon. You know, one of the things I tried to always do early in my career was become the best bartender in my venue and then go to another venue and do the same and keep challenging myself until I could work at the best venue in the world and then, you know, hopefully become the best bartender within that venue. So if you're kind of creatively stifled and, you know, the next step is you being told, well, we want to make you a manager or things like that, you know, we're going to give you an extra $5,000 a year or whatever it is. I think that sometimes that can actually push you out of the industry because you can get sick of it, or you can, you know, fall out of love with the industry or get jaded or eventually move into some other kind of element of the industry, whether it's brand ambassadors or things. So if you're still creatively driven, then you should really nurture that. And one of the biggest things I learned last year in taking some time away was anything that gives you a creative hit or a micro kind of dopamine hit, and that might be like just listening to music, for example, or it could be, you know, coming up with a new cocktail, then you should nurture that and keep trying to do that, because those little hits are much more valuable than 100 likes on Instagram or something like that. So I think it's hugely important, especially for cocktail bartenders who are creatives.
That's awesome advice. And last final question. If you could have a gigantic billboard, I've stolen this question from Tim Ferriss. I fucking love this question. If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere with anything on it, so basically, metaphorically speaking, reaching, you know, millions of bartenders, what would it say and why? So it could be a few words, a paragraph, it could be a quote, it could be something you live by, something you could get out to all bartenders.
Does it have to be about bartending?
Don't have to be about bartending at all, just getting out to people in the industry, right?
I think one of the things I'm learning is I'm getting older, and, you know, I'm getting clucky because we're hoping to have kids in the next couple of years, so maybe I'm just softening as I get older. But it's to sympathise and empathise, you know.
Sympathise, empathise.
People are in different situations than you, and a lot of people have gone through some heavy shit. A lot of people have gone through heavy shit that day or that week or that year or that life, and you don't know their situation. And it's important to listen, it's important to ask questions, and it's important to care and not to judge. And I don't think you should jump to conclusions with the actions of what anyone does, or, you know, I just think it's important to give people a chance and to not judge too quickly, and to try to understand the reasons for why they are that way, if it's different to you or they have a different opinion. So
that's
awesome. It is quite broad, I guess.
No, so I think it's great. Sympathise and empathise. I think those are great. That's a great message. It's a great message just for life in general, but it's also a great message for people that come into your venue. In that, you know, I talk a lot about this with people I work with, is that we don't know what their day has been like. We don't know how long they've been waiting to come into this restaurant. It might be their first time out in God knows how long. And, you know, we're there to you know, help them have a fantastic time. We're not there to judge them on their choice of food or the choice of drink or how they want things done. You know, so I think sympathise and empathise is great in venue, but it's also great life in general.
When you judge people on what they drink, let's talk about, like, okay, we talked about shoes before, okay? Like, I don't know much about shoes. I really don't. But say, for example, I want to go and get myself a really nice pair of shoes, and there I am, I'm wearing my, like, crappy shoes that I got from H&M that are falling apart at the soles, and I walk into this shoe store and I say, hey, I need a pair of shoes. I've got this much money. What do you recommend? That guy or girl shouldn't be judging me on my shoes because I don't have experience in this and I'm asking for help. And the same applies if I go into a bar and I say, hey, I really like vodka and Coca-Cola. I've got money for a cocktail. What would you recommend? And I get judgment from that. I think is absolutely pitiful. I mean, people don't live their lives in alcohol like we do. They don't know as much as we do. So
it's true. It's true. I think the people who, and a lot of time, broad generalization, but I feel that when I come across that attitude, I do find that attitude sometimes come from people who didn't start in the pub.
Yeah.
You know?
Didn't realise how delicious 15 vodka and Coca-Colas can be.
Yeah. That's right. Man, dude, thank you so much for coming, dude. It's been an absolute pleasure, man, and a privilege to catch up. So good to see you again as well, man.
You too, mate. Great to see you too, buddy.
Thanks, brother, man. Bam! All right. Boom, baby. This is Sven again. Thank you so much for listening to the podcast. I hope you found that both interesting and informative, and that there was something in there for you that you can take with you in your future career in hospitality. Now, if you want to follow what we're doing here at Ananas, pop over to our Facebook page. You can find us on facebook.com/Ananas Academy. Give us a thumbs up and a like, and there'll be loads of material on there. We'll be announcing any new courses and new podcasts on there as well. And if you're interested in learning more about what it takes to be a great bartender or a great waiter or a great server in general, go to ananasacademy.com and create your own profile. Now, if you're an owner or a venue manager and you'd like to give the gift of Ananas to your team, you can visit ananasacademy.com and create your own organization there and start inviting your team to start learning. That's it. Rock and roll. I hope to see you back here again soon for more podcasts. Cheers and kapow. Boom.